I was crouched beside the galley sink on the blue horizon, wrench in hand, tightening the stubborn faucet handle when I heard his voice behind me, smooth, taunting, and laced with the kind of smug superiority that makes your stomach knot. "Plumbers don't belong on yachts like this," Ethan Cole said, his tone dripping with disdain, hands shoved lazily into his pockets like he was inspecting something beneath him. The words hit like a slap. I froze, my knuckles whitening around the wrench. Slowly I turned my head just enough to catch the reflection of the late afternoon sun glinting off his expensive sunglasses. His mouth was curled in that smug, self-satisfied way, the kind of smirk that said he believed every word. To him, I wasn't Michael Grant, a man who'd built and earned every damn thing in his life, but just his wife's aging father, a retired has-been, a hanger-on, a man pretending to belong in a world he couldn't possibly afford. In Ethan's eyes, I was an imposter in borrowed luxury, tinkering in a place that didn't belong to me. He gave the chrome fixture a condescending little tap with his knuckle and chuckled, like the punchline was obvious. "Guess the rental company throws in maintenance for free, huh?" I stood up slowly, every motion deliberate, my eyes locked on him. My pulse pounded not from the work, but from the audacity, the sheer disrespect radiating from him. He didn't even try to hide it. For a beat, I just studied him, the pressed linen shirt he hadn't bought, the yacht shoes too clean to have ever touched a deck in real weather, the hollow arrogance of a man who thought the world was his servant. Then I said it, quietly, steadily. "This is my yacht." The smirk evaporated, his jaw tightened. Above us, from the deck, I could hear Rachel's laughter, my daughter floating down with the warm hum of conversation. She was with his parents, Linda and Thomas, still admiring the harbor. They had no idea that just below their feet, the air was crackling with something sharp and ugly. Ethan's eyebrows rose a fraction, his gaze sharpening as if he was trying to decide whether I was bluffing. I didn't look away. I let the truth sit there, heavy between us, until the space felt so tight it could snap. You wouldn't believe what led to that moment, or what I did after that sentence left my mouth. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? The blue horizon swayed gently in her slip at Marina del Rey, her polished hull throwing back the sunlight in blinding flashes. The masts of neighboring yachts stood like a regiment of polished spears against the cobalt sky, the rigging chiming softly in the breeze. Sunlight fractured over the water into shards of silver, and the warm California air carried that familiar cocktail of salt and diesel luxury with an edge. I'd come early. Always did. I liked being the first one aboard, making sure every mooring line was snug, every rail spotless, every trace of dust or salt gone. The yacht was flawless, 42 feet of gleaming fiberglass and chrome, each detail exactly as I'd envisioned when I signed the wire transfer back in March, $2.8 million. Paid. In. Full. She wasn't some passing indulgence. She was a statement, a gift. 2 months ago, on Rachel's birthday, she'd said it almost offhand how she missed those quiet mornings when it was just her and me, fishing off the coast before the rest of the world woke up. "I wish we could just get away on a boat somewhere," she'd murmured, glancing toward the kitchen where Ethan's voice was raised, griping to someone over the phone about a client he clearly thought was beneath him. That was the seed. A sanctuary on the water, away from the sharpness in his voice, away from the constant performance, a place where my daughter could breathe. I'd decided I'd give them the yacht as a rental for the weekend, let them relax, let Rachel see what peace looked like again, then surprise them with the truth. In my mind, I could already see Rachel's smile. I'd even allowed myself to imagine Ethan, for once, showing me something like respect. The gangway groaned as they arrived. Ethan stepped on first designer loafers, clicking against the teak deck as though he were walking into a showroom. His gaze swept the length of the vessel, eyes calculating, appraising. He ran a casual hand along the butter-soft leather seating, and then, with a smirk, said, "Not bad," in the same tone you'd use when pretending to be impressed by a used sedan. Rachel followed, her sunglasses pushing back the curtain of dark hair, a chic tote on her shoulder. She took in the deck with a careful, measured glance, then leaned closer to me, her voice low. "Dad, please tell me you didn't blow your retirement on this." Her tone, quiet, clipped, wasn't concern. It was a warning. Behind her came Thomas and Linda Cole. Thomas, broad-shouldered and still carrying himself like a man who'd earned every callous, shook my hand firmly. Linda's soft smile and graceful presence had a way of making everyone else seem clumsy by comparison. "Michael," Thomas said, "this is a beautiful boat." Linda brushed her fingers over the polished railing, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "It's stunning. You've outdone yourself." Ethan had already wandered to the helm, his fingers grazing the navigation controls like he was trying them on for size. "This nav system alone costs more than most people make in a year," he said, as though the fact might somehow give him ownership. I kept my tone polite. "She's got everything you'd need for a trip up the coast. Thought it'd be nice to spend some time together." Rachel shifted her tote, avoiding my eyes. "It's nice, Dad," she said, the pause and inflection carrying that same old cocktail of embarrassment and caution. I let it slide. I wasn't here to spar. I was here to give them a memory. What I didn't know, what none of them could have guessed, was that before the day was out, Ethan's smirk would be gone, Rachel's careful distance would shatter, and the memory we'd leave with would be burned into every one of us for entirely different reasons than I'd planned. We gathered on the aft deck, where I'd laid out a spread meant to feel effortless fresh fruit glistening on a porcelain platter, artisan crackers, and a chilled bottle of Sauvignon Blanc resting in its bucket, beads of condensation running down the glass. The late afternoon light danced across the water in fractured silver, and for a fleeting moment I let myself believe the day might go as I'd envisioned. Ethan leaned against the railing, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the marina in miniature, one ankle crossed over the other in a posture so casual it was almost performative. He plucked a grape from the bowl, turned it idly between his fingers like a coin, and popped it into his mouth. "So," he said in that falsely pleasant tone that always carried a hook, "how does a retired, what was it again, contractor, afford something like this for the weekend?" Rachel's head snapped toward him. "Ethan," he didn't even glance at her. "No, really, I'm curious. Even a 2-day charter on a boat like this runs into 5 figures. That's a lot of Social Security checks." The jab landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending a ripple through the air between us. I took a deliberate sip of wine, letting the cool sharpness coat my tongue before answering. "I've done all right for myself over the years." "Right," he said, drawing it out just enough to make it sting. "Well, I guess everyone gets to play yacht club once in their life." Linda's gentle throat clearing broke the silence. "It's a beautiful day. Let's just enjoy it." Thomas, ever the diplomat, nodded, but Ethan was already prowling toward the helm, his steps slow, deliberate. He traced a finger along the wheel as though it belonged to him, tapped the chrome trim with his knuckle, and smirked. "You know, if you rent from the wrong company, they'll nickel and dime you for every little feature, autopilot, sonar, even the stereo. I hope they gave you a good deal, Michael." Rachel shifted beside me, the strap of her tote twisting in her hands. "Maybe we should sit down, have lunch?" I gestured toward the cabin. "It's ready when you are." Inside, the salon was a showcase mahogany gleaming, the dining table dressed in bone china and crystal glasses that caught the light in tiny rainbows. I'd prepared grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a crisp salad. It was a meal designed to be generous without ostentation, a reflection of care. We took our seats, but Ethan made sure his chair scraped against the floor just a fraction too loud. "You really went all out for a rental," he remarked, holding a crystal glass up to the light like a jeweler inspecting a counterfeit. "Top shelf." "Ethan," Thomas said, his voice firm. "Enough." Ethan lifted a hand in mock surrender. "Just making conversation. I'm just saying, if I were retired, I'd think twice before burning through my savings to impress people." It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't accidental. Rachel stared down at her plate, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, maybe next time we could do something simpler. You know, more practical." "Like what?" I asked lightly, forcing a smile. "Miniature golf?" She didn't even try to fake a laugh. We began to eat, but Ethan couldn't help himself. "Salmon's perfect," he said, dabbing at his mouth with a linen napkin. "Guess you've had plenty of time to practice in retirement. No deadlines, no clients breathing down your neck. Must be nice." The fork in my hand felt heavier than it should. "I worked for over 30 years, I said evenly. Deadlines and clients were my life." Ethan smiled like a man who thought he'd scored another hit. "And now you get to live out your bucket list. Just maybe stick to things in your tax bracket." Oh, the words hung there, poisonous. Thomas set his fork down with deliberate precision, his eyes narrowing. Ethan. But Ethan leaned back, swirling his wine, as if he were savoring a victory. I mean, look at this place. This weekend probably costs more than most people make in 2 months. And if something breaks, you're stuck with the bill. That's the problem with trying to look the part. It's expensive to keep the illusion alive. I narrowed my eyes, my voice still steady but edged with steel. Let's just enjoy the meal. Linda's smile was tight now, the kind people wear when they're trying to hold a gathering together by sheer will. Yes, let's... But in that instant, I felt it, the first hairline crack in the day I'd so carefully constructed. The first warning that the gift I'd imagined as a bridge might, in fact, be turning into a fault line. Ethan leaned back, satisfied, sipping his wine like a man who believed he'd established dominance. Rachel kept her gaze fixed on her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. And I sat there, serving a man who was dismantling not just my meal, but the dignity I'd wrapped into every detail of this day. And deep down I knew this wasn't the peak of his condescension. Not yet. After lunch, the plate still warm from the salmon I'd prepared, Ethan stood with a theatrical stretch, as if the meal had been some kind of chore he'd heroically endured. I'm going to take a look around below deck, he announced, already moving toward the companionway without waiting for permission. See what other luxury perks this charter company throws in. Rachel half rose from her chair. Ethan, maybe Dad? He cut her off with a dismissive wave. Relax, just curious. I watched him vanish down the narrow stairs, his footfalls growing fainter, swallowed by the low hum of the yacht systems. For a few seconds, all I heard was the familiar creak of the hull and the steady slap of water against the stern. Then came the sound, subtle but wrong. A metallic scrape, the hiss of running water, a cabinet door closing, another sharper grind of metal on metal. Linda glanced at me, eyebrows pinched in mild concern. Something wrong down there? I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Probably just poking around. But in my gut, the knot tightened. Years of running multi-million-dollar projects had taught me to recognize the difference between idle curiosity and intentional movement. A minute later, the noises stopped. Ethan reappeared on the stairs, wearing a smile that was just a shade too satisfied. Great boat, he said, lowering himself into his chair with exaggerated ease. You know, Michael, maybe I should help with the cleanup later. Get familiar with the galley in case anything comes up. That alone was enough to set off every internal alarm. Ethan volunteering to help in the galley was about as likely as him showing up to work before noon possible in theory, but not in nature. Kind offer, I replied evenly, but I've got it handled. He shrugged, sipping his wine with the smugness of someone who thought he'd just planted a seed. Suit yourself. Oh. The conversation drifted elsewhere, but my mind stayed locked on the sounds I'd heard. Something down there wasn't right. I excused myself casually, glass in hand, and strolled toward the navigation room tucked behind the main cabin. The space glowed with the cool blue wash of LED panels. I reached for the concealed latch beside the chart table, pressing it until a section of mahogany slid back with a soft click. Behind it was the yacht's security hub, 8 cameras covering every inch of the vessel, inside and out. I'd had them installed last month, not because I expected trouble, but because in business and in family you prepare for what people are capable of, not just what you hope they'll do. I rewound the feed to the moment Ethan left the table. On camera 3, the galley came into view. There he was moving with that entitled ease, like a man inspecting a property he planned to acquire. First, he tested the faucet, turning it on and off, working perfectly. Then, after glancing toward the doorway, he braced a foot against the cabinet and twisted the handle hard with both hands. The camera caught the violent motion, the wrenching torque, and then the sudden gush of water from the now broken fixture. Not an accident. Not even reckless curiosity. It was calculated. I watched as he grabbed a dish towel, carefully wiping away the faint metal shavings, running his finger along the base to check for any trace. Then he stepped back, and there it was, a faint, self-satisfied smirk, like a man admiring a job well done. My jaw tightened, my hands curling into fists. This wasn't about plumbing. This was about humiliation, about asserting himself by sabotaging something I owned on my turf, in front of my family. I copied the clip to a portable drive, slipped it into my pocket, and slid the panel shut. evidence in hand. When I returned to the deck, the others were gathered in the shade, their laughter easy and untroubled. Ethan was leaning against the railing, gesturing animatedly as he told Thomas some story, his posture as relaxed as if nothing had happened. But across that stretch of deck, our eyes met. His carried the lazy arrogance of a man who thought he'd just gained the upper hand. And I knew without question that he'd just started a game. The only mistake he made was assuming I hadn't been playing at a professional level long before he ever learned the rules. I didn't go at him right away. Years in negotiations had taught me a simple truth: timing was more lethal than volume. Let a man bask in his confidence, and when the floor drops out, the fall crushes him twice as hard. Back on deck, I settled into a chair near the table where the Sauvignon Blanc still sweated in its bucket, condensation pooling at the base. The breeze had stiffened, carrying the sharp tang of salt and a faint thread of diesel from a trawler easing past the marina entrance. "Ethan," I said, as casually as if I were asking about the weather, "mind telling me what you were doing in the galley earlier?" His head turned, the easy grin already in place. "What do you mean?" "You were down there a while," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Just wondering if you found everything you needed." For half a heartbeat, his eyes sharpened calculation, recognition before the grin widened again. "Just stretching my legs. You know me, always curious about how things work." Rachel angled her head toward him. "You were looking at the faucet, right? I thought I heard water running." "Oh, that?" He gave a shrug, as if it were barely worth mentioning. "Yeah, it seemed a little sticky. Figured you'd want to know." "Sticky?" Thomas repeated, his brow furrowing. Ethan spread his hands, all innocent charm. "Old boats, rental gear stuff wears out." "Funny," I said, not raising my voice. "It was working fine before you went down there." He chuckled, a thin edge under the sound. "Michael, it's just a faucet, probably corroded from salt air. Have the rental company send someone to replace it." The word rental hung in the air like a sour note. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my tablet, setting it down between us. "I think," I said, tapping the screen, "we should all take a look at something." Rachel leaned forward, curiosity drawing her in. Thomas and Linda exchanged a glance, their smiles slipping. Ethan stayed put, but the edges of his own froze. The footage came up crisp and clear the galley from camera 3. There was Ethan, walking in with that easy swagger, testing the faucet smooth, perfect, then pausing to glance toward the doorway. He planted one foot, gripped the handle with both hands, and twisted hard. The grinding of metal was sharp enough to make Linda flinch. Water burst from the damaged fitting. No one spoke. "Looks fine to me," I narrated evenly over the playback. "Until here." I tapped the timeline. Linda's hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God." Thomas sat back slowly, his expression hardening. "Ethan, is this exactly what it looks like?" Ethan let out a laugh, brittle and too loud. "Come on, it's not, look. I was trying to fix it and it broke." "Simple." "Fix what?" I asked. "It was working perfectly." Rachel's gaze jumped between us. "Ethan?" He straightened, the mask of easy charm cracking. "Maybe I overdid it, but it's just a faucet, no harm done." Thomas leaned in, his voice low but sharp. "Deliberately damaging someone's property isn't no harm done." I let the silence stretch until it felt like a taut line. Then I said, "I thought we were here to enjoy the day, make some memories worth keeping. But watching that," I tapped the tablet again, "makes me wonder what you were really trying to prove." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Maybe I was proving that blowing money on a yacht you can't afford is stupid." Rachel flinched as if struck. Linda's expression turned to stone. Thomas shook his head once, slow and deliberate. I closed the tablet with a soft click. "Interesting theory," I said, my voice like a held blade, "especially since you've been so concerned about the financial burden on the owner." Ethan's eyes narrowed to slits. "Why wouldn't I be?" I held his gaze, feeling the shift in the air, the subtle tilt as control slid my way. "We'll get to that," I said quietly. "But first, let's make sure we're all clear on exactly what happened here." "Ho!" I poured myself another glass of wine, each motion deliberate. The game wasn't over, it had just moved onto my board. Ethan shifted his weight, trying to slide back into the relaxed stance he'd worn all afternoon, but the rigid set of his jaw betrayed him. "Michael," he said, forcing a chuckle, "we're making a mountain out of a molehill here. It's a faucet. We'll call the charter company. They'll fix it. Done." "Charter company," I repeated slowly, letting the words turn over in my mouth as if I were trying to identify a bitter flavor. You've been awfully sure all day that this is a rental. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, as though he'd spotted an opening in a debate. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're not really expecting us to buy into this millionaire yachtsman act, are you? Thomas's brow furrowed, but I didn't break eye contact with Ethan. What if I told you this isn't a rental? Ethan gave a short, dismissive laugh. Come on, you really expect us to believe... It's mine, I said, my voice cutting through the air like the snap of a sail in the wind. The deck went still. The only sound was the rhythmic slap of water against the hull. Rachel's eyes widened, blinking as though she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. Linda's gaze moved between us, lips parting in a quiet gasp. I bought the Blue Horizon in March, I continued. Each fact deliberate, undeniable. 2.8 million. Paid in cash. She's registered with the Coast Guard under my name, insured on my policy, and the marina slip fees come directly out of my account every month. The color drained from Ethan's face, as if the sun had gone behind a cloud just for him. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Rachel's voice broke the silence. You own this? I nodded. Yes. And until today, the plan was to let you think it was a rental, let you both enjoy it without pressure, then surprise you by telling you it was yours to keep, a gift. Her hand pressed to her chest. A gift? Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed hard. Wait, you were going to give this to us? Was, I said, the single syllable dropping like an anchor. That offer no longer stands. His head snapped up, indignation fighting to reassert itself. You're serious? Over one little mistake? One little mistake? Thomas's voice was sharp now, steel in the tone. Ethan, we all saw the video. That wasn't a mistake. That was deliberate damage. Linda's voice trembled, though her eyes were hard. I can't believe you'd do that to Michael after everything he's done for you. Ethan spread his hands, trying to project calm, but the edge in his voice betrayed him. Look, I was frustrated, okay? Seeing him spend like this, it didn't make sense. I thought maybe I needed to send a message. Rachel turned toward him, her voice low and shaking. By breaking something? On a boat you thought he'd rented? It's not like that, Ethan said quickly, but the bite was gone. I didn't know it was his. That's exactly the problem, I said, my voice even precise. You thought I was just some old man playing dress-up. You decided that justified disrespect. You thought it was safe. For the first time all day, Ethan's confidence wavered. His eyes darted from Rachel to his parents, then back to me, looking for an ally and finding none. Michael, come on, I didn't mean... You meant every second of it, I said, not raising my voice, but slicing through his protest. And now you know the cost. He pressed his lips together, the fight draining from him as he realized there was no good move left. The panic didn't show in his words, it showed in his eyes, in the way they kept flicking toward the tablet on the table, as if the evidence might vanish if he willed it hard enough. Rachel's voice was small. Dad, I'm so sorry. I nodded to her, but my gaze stayed locked on Ethan. The tide had turned, the wind was in my sails, and we both knew exactly who was at the helm now. Ethan leaned forward, planting his palms on the table, as if bracing against a wave. Michael, listen, yeah, I screwed up, but this doesn't have to be the end of it. We can move past this. I studied him for a long beat. You think this is about a faucet? He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. In the past 10 years, I said, my voice even but unyielding, I paid Rachel's graduate tuition $40,000, wrote a check for $25,000 toward your wedding, put $60,000 down on your first house, covered your emergencies, your medical bills, a new refrigerator when yours died. That's over $140,000. And that's not counting dinners, trips, holidays. The only thing I've ever asked in return is basic respect. Rachel's eyes widened. I could see her silently tallying the numbers. Linda shifted in her chair, discomfort flickering across her face. Thomas's jaw set like granite. Ethan tried for a smirk. And you've had my gratitude. I shook my head slowly. Gratitude isn't mocking me in front of my daughter. It isn't sabotaging my property because you assumed it was a rental and thought you could get away with it. He leaned back, let out a short, humorless laugh. So this is some kind of test? You've been playing the humble retiree all this time, just waiting for the big reveal to see who treats you different? That's enough, Thomas said sharply. But Ethan plowed ahead. Because that's manipulative, Michael. If you'd told me from the start. If I'd told you from the start, I cut in, I'd never have seen the real you. That landed like a hammer. Rachel turned to him, her voice trembling. Ethan, why? Even if it was a rental, it's still Dad's. He invited you here. He glanced at her, then back at me. I thought maybe if I embarrassed you a little, you'd think twice before throwing money around. I was looking out for the family. Linda's gasp was sharp. Looking out for the family? By breaking something? Thomas's voice dropped into a low, final register. You didn't just break a faucet, you broke trust. And from where I'm sitting, that's not something you're getting back. Ethan's mask slipped, his voice edged with desperation. Fine. I'll pay for the repair. Hell, I'll upgrade the whole galley. Just don't throw away everything over this. I stood, placing both hands on the back of my chair. I'm not throwing anything away, Ethan. You are. The blue horizon stays with me. The gift is gone. And for today, I think you and Rachel should pack your things and leave. Rachel's face crumpled. Dad, you made your choice earlier, I said gently but firmly, when you sat silent while he tore me down. I hope it was worth it. The only sounds were the soft creak of the yacht and the distant call of gulls. Ethan looked around, searching for an ally. Thomas's eyes were cold steel. Linda couldn't meet his gaze. Rachel stared down at her hands. Fine, he spat. Let's go. He shoved his chair back, the teak floor screeching under the legs, and stalked toward the cabin. Rachel followed, her steps dragging, her head bowed. From the deck, I watched them cross the gangway, Ethan's hands cutting through the air as he spoke sharply to her. Their figures grew smaller against the marina, diminished not by distance but by their own choices. Linda exhaled shakily. Michael, I'm so sorry. Oh. Thomas placed a steady hand on my shoulder. If you'd prefer we leave. I shook my head. Number, you've shown me nothing but respect. Please, stay. Let's enjoy the rest of the day the way it was meant to be. We settled back on the deck, the marina slowly quieting as the late afternoon crowd thinned. The blue horizon swayed in her berth, lines creaking gently against the cleats, almost as if she herself had exhaled in relief. Thomas uncorked the bottle I'd been saving for a different kind of celebration, an aged Chardonnay, golden and rich. He poured 3 glasses, the liquid catching the last shards of sunlight. To character, he said simply, raising his glass. I met his eyes, then Linda's, and lifted mine. To character. The clink was soft, but it resonated final, unshakable. We sipped in easy silence, gulls wheeling overhead, the Pacific stretching beyond the breakwater in shimmering ribbons of silver and blue. My mind flickered back to the plan I'd made that morning. The quiet reveal, Rachel's laughter, maybe even Ethan's begrudging smile. That vision was long gone, replaced by the sharp clarity of what the day had truly given me. It wasn't about money, or the yacht, or proving a point. It was about truth. Ethan had shown me exactly who he was, when he thought I had nothing worth respecting. And Rachel, whether she realized it yet or not, she'd made her choice too. And I had made mine. Do you think they'll be all right? Linda asked quietly. I set my glass down, watching the light ripple across the water. Ethan will land on his feet. Men like him always do. As for Rachel, she'll have to decide if she wants to share her life with a man who burns bridges just to watch the flames. The sun was sinking now, the water gilded in molten gold. The brass compass at the helm caught the light, its needle steady, pointing true north. A quiet settled over me, not the strained hush from earlier, but a stillness with weight. Justice hadn't been loud. It hadn't needed to be. It had come in the natural consequence of arrogance colliding with reality. Ethan had destroyed his own inheritance with his own hands, as surely as he'd destroyed that faucet. And as the last sliver of sun dipped beneath the horizon, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was free.